Thank you. So process architecture, we will get to today. Our agenda will be anybody new to the meeting. We'll do a little intros. We'll do our usual successes and challenges within your unit around process. And then we'll talk about process architecture, what it is, why, and how we can get it embedded in the fabric. We'll talk a little bit about some of the examples that are being built on the campus of different process management architectures. And we'll talk about some drop-in hours that we're putting towards the end of the meeting as well. So that's today's agenda. Does anybody have anything they want to add before we get to your inside your unit look? Okay, here we are on May 4th. You can see what we've done last time, where we're headed. This is kind of what we have through January of 2020. This is kind of our general progress. Again, these topics came from the group. So we are on May 4th today. So do we have any new process champions that have joined us that have not been on a meeting yet? Anybody brand new?
Oh, this is my first meeting today.
Okay, if you want to just introduce yourself to the group, sorry to throw you on the spot. I just want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to introduce and just kind of say a little bit about what unit they're in.
Hi, I'm Joel. I'm new under Janet's team in the BRS Central Services. And I don't know if you know Allison. I'm Allison's new teammate, and I'm doing the same work as her.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Joel. We appreciate you being here. Feel free to invite others. Anyone else new?
I'm new to this group, but I'm doing the Staff Changemakers program through Berkeley Public Health. And I work within the Center of Excellence for Maternal Child Adolescent Health. I oversee a federal training grant as well as manage master's students in the Maternal Child Adolescent Health program, and I'm here to be a fly on the wall. I'm excited to learn.
Welcome, Jessica. Thanks for joining us. Anyone else who's new? Feel free to invite others. Full, open, welcome. The bigger, the better, the merrier. The more people thinking process on the campus, the easier our job gets. Okay, if you are entering or if someone enters, feel free to introduce yourself or stop me at any time if new people join us. Okay. So we always like to do this because it helps us kind of open up just into what's happening in your unit. So we like to take 5 or 10 minutes every process champion meeting to just open up the discussion to everybody to share any kind of new thinking around process that might be happening in your unit. And I just like to say that this can be anything, goods, bads, uglies, even things like there is no process in my unit. Those are very valuable pieces of data to share. And so opening up the floor to anybody being vulnerable or exciting big wins, small wins of any kind in your unit. I'm just going to turn it over to the group, and you can either raise your hand or speak out in any way. It's not a big group, so I think we'll be able to handle it.
I can share real quick. This is Lucas. I missed the last meeting or two, and that's part of the challenges that we've been having, which are thankfully temporary, but we're understaffed. We're down 2 FTEs in what's a pretty small unit. I work for the online MPH program in the School of Public Health. So we are resolving that situation, but before we lost the staff, we laid the framework for our process documentation phase, and we're making a plan to hold a retreat this summer to kind of get a jump start on what we had already started. So we're excited to get back into it once we're restaffed up in short order here.
Outstanding. Thanks for sharing, Lucas. We very much appreciate it. Other looks, the microfiche inside of your unit. I love crickets as a facilitator. It always feels lovely. It practices my extended silence. Janet.
I'll add something here, and Nick can actually kind of speak to this a little bit as well, right? So we've been involved in a project. We're working with a different organization. So, it's a process where we as HR handle part of the process and another unit handles another part of the process, right? But it's very interactive. And we're doing process improvement on our side, which then, of course, theoretically drives process improvement on our colleagues' side as well. And we have great difficulty getting them to help, put some skin in the game here, right? And I think that's a big challenge, and again, maybe because we, interact with so many different groups outside of ourselves, we run into this, but we tend to run into problems where, again, we're trying to make process improvement efforts on our end, but because our processes leak out of our group, we run into problems with maybe the other group not being ready. They don't understand process improvement. They don't want to be transparent about it, right? Like, we run into these different issues. And, sometimes we go to Nick, we can't get these people to help us. And Nick goes in and tries to help smooth things out and stuff. But, I think that's a challenge. And I don't think that we're unique from that perspective, that, other groups probably are running into that as well. And, maybe we can think about ways of how we can do that, or how we can maybe break that down, or, whatever. I don't know. Maybe we could put our heads together and think about how we can maybe address that one.
Yeah, I think it's, I'll say a few things and then I'll turn it over to the group if people have comments around this. I would say that I agree you're not alone. I think that part of the biggest, and this is actually very fitting as a topic, alluding to process architecture too. So if everybody had this process architecture shelving system, you're going to see what's up and downstream, right? So we're not stuck in our own silo and what's up and downstream and where the process handoffs are. If everybody had these architectures, we could look at them and see that what's up and downstream and how the big picture. So we could, even if we can't and someone's not ready, we could see that that's happening and they could see that. So I think driving transparency and a management framework around process will help that, which this is very fitting because we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So I think it's wonderful. I see a couple of hands up. So if people want to build on this topic first, feel free to do so, but then I will turn it over to Helena, I think had her hand up, as well as Michael Thompson.
I wasn't going to build on that. So should I?
If it's okay, I think just go ahead, Helena. If people want to build on it, we can return to it. It's no big deal.
Okay. One of a project I'm working on that I kind of wanted some help with is I produced the Berkeley Events Network certificate program every year. And all the documentation was in this like Google file or Google Drive, and hard for other people to find. So I'm one of the things I'm thinking about is, do I put it all in ProMap? And would that be a good solution for the folks in the certificate program?
Lovely. I think that's wonderful. I mean, I think you have that ability in your own hands without us, because you have an architecture, in your unit, you have trained people in ProMap. And so the lovely part of this is you're bringing a problem to the table or a question that, you have the ability in your own unit to do, which is really, really wonderful. And 2 years ago, we wouldn't have had that.
And I love how Janet's conversation piece kicks off pretty well one of our topics, and actually, Helena, what you just brought up kicks up the second topic later on. So besides, using one of us as a resource, we're going to talk about another resource that could be available to you to help you out with work like this.
Okay, great.
So yeah, that's really lovely, Helena.
Yay.
For sure.
Because I know how my brain works, and this totally makes sense. And I don't want to do this all by myself, because I realize when I try to plug into other people's architecture, it's not, I get confused, but
Happy to help,
okay, great.
for sure. Other thoughts? Michael, did you have your hand up?
I did. And you guys, I love to say it's a challenge. I know I get on these meetings all the time and say, I'm so busy, I have so much to do. And usually, you guys will say, okay, that's fine. Well, why don't you do this work and then life will be better. And I honestly have a hard time saying no to stuff that's not mine. And it interferes with my ability to take some time and build out some processes and come up with some written stuff, because I love saying yes. I love being in everyone else's business. I know this is my personal stuff, but it's really hard to shift gears and say, no, actually, this belongs to you, in order to free up the time to roll out the new processes. It's like, there's got to be we cut off the old way and start the process way. And I can imagine me, if Nick Inslee says, hey, Mike, you know what, open invitation, we come up with some good processes. I can imagine myself saying, yeah, there's great processes, but I can't even tell you no, do the new process. I'm not saying that I want to go there. That's just a challenge. I just wanted to raise it up to the group. Thank you guys for being my therapists.
Great stuff, Michael. Ongoing problem solving. Other thoughts? Shining the light or the darkness inside your unit, both of which are good, fine. All right, I'm gonna move us, Allison, lovely.
Hey, so I think the one thing that we're struggling a little bit with is having regionalized our organizations. The training is sort of now siloed. And so for us to all follow some best practices, we're sort of it's just a lot harder, especially when there's areas of compliance that we're trying to really tighten up. So just feeling that pain a little bit right now.
Understood. Yep. Anything else people would like to share? All right, I'm gonna keep moving forward, but feel free to, if things come to mind or you are, something comes up that is happening in your unit that another thought might have triggered inside, feel free to stop me at any time. I'm gonna move forward though, considering silence, even though I'm trying to get better with it, makes me uncomfortable. Okay, so since today was about process architecture, I'm gonna start with 2 orange boxes. And they're gonna be populated with giving us a little background. If we want process architecture, which I'm gonna really just say before I say anything else, process architecture is a buzzy word, but I like it. But what is it? It's a shelving system. It's a bookcase. It's really a bookcase of your processes, right? The analogy I like to use is that it's like an index card catalog, right? It's like, how do we pull out the drawer of where your processes sit that aren't just compartmentalized into your own silo, right? So it's an index card catalog that goes across all silos, which is process. We're trying to stay out of silos, step outside organizational charts, and really start to think about it. So in its simplest form, I'm going to define it, but I'm going to start with a why. Why is it important? Some of you may have seen this. You may see it again next week. I apologize for those that hear it over and over and over again. The beauty of this is I'm trying to make it as simple as possible so that we can make it ubiquitous. So what's the problem and the opportunity here? We believe that Berkeley lacks transparency, documentation, consistency, adherence, and ownership and accountability to its processes. Does anybody disagree with that? I'm happy to have anyone disagree with it. I'm more than happy to say I disagree. So in the same breath of saying all this, we have an office that's called the Business Process Management Office, and it tears me up to say that this is the truth, but this is the truth, right? We're not alone. A lot of the comments that were shined inside your unit earlier 5 minutes ago have to do with accountability, have to do with who's the process owner, have to do with the ability to say no. Hard to do, hard to do. Okay, so we think this is the why. I'm going to pose the question of there are probably other things. So if there are better problems out there or more problems out there, feel free to add to this. We'll make the list bigger, because if we can solve it, we will. So we see the opportunity to grow process maturity. What does that mean? We're going to remove the word maturity, I think, here for the future because we don't like it, but to grow process. Let's think about growing process on the campus and really thinking about transitioning the university to a process and metrics-based organization to make better decisions for our mission of education, research, and community service. So we see that as the opportunity, and we see this risk if we don't do this. Little by little, every one of you here in this call are important. We're showing up because we care and we think process in the fabric of the university needs to happen. If we don't do this, if we don't do it in a structured and transparent way, we can never say no. We can't show everybody. If we're not doing it somewhat similar, we can't say no. We're really not able to implement these process improvement efficiencies. Janet alluded to it. What if we're not, we're doing process improvement, but our neighbor next to us in the cracked painted house is not, right? We have to really try to do this together. It's going to take time. As we know, this is a grass movement. We have to think about implementing efficiencies to what we call value chains. And I'll define those in just a minute. They're really just our end-to-end processes, but they create the value in the institution of the mission of the institution, research, education, and community service. What do we do to bring value in an institution of higher education? All right, so I'm going to define it a little bit more technically. I call it a bookshelf. Doesn't have to be full of all the books that are processes, but I call it a bookshelf because the empty shelves are just as important. If we create an infrastructure of where your processes live, you get to see the gaps that you might only have in title, not mapped. You might not even know you're doing it. So what is process architecture? It is the end-to-end view of Berkeley's value chains. Our value chains, if I'm going to use that, right, I have to define it. So it really is just a set of the processes that our institution performs to deliver the competitive advantage and serve the mission. So I'm going to stop there for a minute. The reason why we're using competitive advantage is because if we think about Berkeley as an institution of higher education, we're not using things like return on investment, ROI, cost savings. Yes, those are important, but we're really looking at a competitive advantage. How is Berkeley competing? How are we providing the best and staying the #1 public institution in the world? We are going to continue to fall off that #1. And one of the ways, I'm not saying the only way, but one of the ways to keep us up there, in my opinion and our opinion, and it's just mine, is process. If we get ahead, if you go to Stanford and you go ask them where their process management system, they're hiring process excellence people every single week. Stanford. Every week, they have titles for process excellence managers. It will do us good to continue to grow our process to maintain our competitive advantage. We want to be the #1 public institution. We want to be the best of the best. So that's why we use competitive advantage. I think there's a comment in the chat. I just want to make sure I'm not missing it. Couple of comments in the chat. One is just that it's not celebrated as individually saving the day, people to love to call their person rather than follow a process. Absolutely. There's no question that people are doing things reactive and not thinking about process. Okay, so I talked about process architecture, talked about value chain. So what's the real value proposition? If we want to maintain our competitive advantage, we really need the flexibility to grow, change, and sustain this. So how do we do this, right? We're going to fall off the #1 spot on and off, on and off. To Michael's point, he says it almost every meeting, I don't have the time. How can I put less with less, which the chancellor said years ago, and still say I don't have time? It is very true. It's its own problem. But I'm going to give you an example of doing less with less. People that have a built architecture, it doesn't even have to be a full shelving system. They might have 50% of their shelving processes or their processes on the shelving system and 50% open. And you see the spaces between their processes. They're still onboarding their people and handing them the process and saying, this is what we do. Training their new people from day one. That's helping you do less with less. You're not sitting there having to shadow them the entire first 6 weeks. You're still doing shadowing, but you can hand them things. You can hand them process. You can hand them things to study. Training is one thing. I bring that up because Allison brought it up. I know we're not there, but I'm trying to give some insight in places and pockets on the campus where I've seen less with less actually happening because they've undertaken process inside. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a minute. If anybody would like to share anything around this area, I'm going to open that up right now before moving on. Kim.
Thank you. I don't have a question, but I have I do have a question. I would like your insight on. So your office has been involved in some really key stuff over the last couple of years, especially with the pandemic and just all the changes that have been happening around campus. And obviously leadership values having you here and having you be a part of helping to fix the chaos on the campus. Why aren't we hearing from leadership that this is so very valuable and then having it filter down to all of our units?
Did you say why aren't we hearing?
Why are we not hearing from leadership?
Yeah.
Why isn't the chancellor saying, look, folks, this is really important and this is why? Why isn't she giving this message?
It's a great question. And we're slowly working our way. So I will say that the ELT, the executive leadership team of the administration, they picked 3 main priorities and it was a fight for 4. It was 4. Process was 4, and that's great. The fact that it's 4 and not 11 is number 1.
That's huge.
The second part, I think, which we are working our way and I have this vision of the chancellor like behind some sort of poster that is like used to be our logo, which was a cement truck, which was funny, but whatever it is, like her head behind something, that's where we're trying to move.
Yeah.
But I think when you have active shooter threats and social justice problems and everything, even though process is underneath all that, it's going to take us time. That's my answer. I'm sure we could all have an answer. I would love, it is our goal. I think, Kim, you are saying our goal to have the chancellor say things. Now, from everybody up there, they are using and sending emails out with links to ProMap. So there is some usable pieces. ProMap's just a tool, but you'll see Cal messages now where there are linkable processes and things that weren't happening 3 years ago.
No, that's a huge gain. Yeah.
So it's a big gain. We're happening. It's slow. It's grass movement. Process for those of us that are here, I think, believe it's the backbone. But but
can I add?
Please do, Mike.
Go ahead. So, Kim, I appreciate what you're saying, and we're definitely been chipping away at leadership to get to the point where it's coming top down, because it's been a grassroots effort the last couple of years, right? So, and we've been making a lot of progress. It's interesting because if we take a step back and if I take a step back and try, and sorry, Chris, stop me before I get too much onto my soapbox here, but but if I could real quick, the value that we've been helping campus with the last couple of years is we've been doing a lot of process work, obviously in the background, but really the forefront of what, Mark and the chancellor and others have seen is a lot of the project management organization type of things, getting people together, facilitating sessions, getting projects done. But along the way, there's been things happening in the background, such as, the process architecture structure, mapping processes, doing some continuous improvement stuff, strategic planning, right? So the bigger vision is not just getting leadership on the same page as, hey, we need to have this business process house. That's one piece of a bigger picture, which includes having a good a good, solid, actionable, transparent, measurable strategic plan. Projects are prioritized, right? We have the process architecture, infrastructure, people are documenting the processes and building the capability of, so we can have, to use the words that we're using, like in Berkeley Public Health, the change maker kind of thought process where people feel like they're enabled to be able to make change and also have the skills and knowledge, and everyone has a universal language to make change, right? So BPM, we're doing lots of different things at the same time in parallel, getting strategic plans solidified, measuring process health, having good KPIs, trying to prioritize projects, trying to build this infrastructure of process architecture, map processes, and build the capability such as Changemaker program that we're doing in School of Public Health, this process champion network, building this this knowledge and this universal language so everyone can kind of go back into the unit, start spreading this word and bringing it up to their leadership as well, right? So I don't have a timeline of when the chancellor or Mark Fisher will send out some message, but we're getting closer because of everything that we've been doing over the last 3.5 years, including
right. Building the foundation, building the foundation. Maybe when there is a rush, there'll be enough there for people to hold on to and bring these tools and practices into their units.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I super appreciate what you all are doing. And, we're doing some of this process mapping in our office, in the Vice Chancellor for Research office. It just would make, some of our lives so much easier. And so maybe we'd be hitting fewer walls if there was that leadership direction. So
and I'll be completely frank and blunt here. We need your guys' help. That's why we're building this process champion network, right? So we can have the champions out in the other units, and it's only I have a small team, and we can only talk to so many people, right? So if you and others in VCRO, for example, think it's important, and I realize Chris, is working with VCRO, Linda Rugg, and others, but if the new Vice Chancellor of Research can kind of get that, that message as well from others beyond just me banging on the door, I mean that's. If it's a combination of Chris and I banging at the door, but then also the people in their own unit saying, hey, we need to listen, we need to do this. That's what we need to get that leadership buy-in here at Berkeley.
Yeah, thank you. I agree.
When it boils down to it, I feel like it's, from the BPMO side, we're educating at the same time we're executing. And educating will always take longer, and we're educating all levels, leadership all the way down to transactional level. So it's like, we're taking that big piece on at the same time we're executing projects. So you guys are seeing the work done by us, but at the same time, we're still trying to teach it to everybody else. So like that, just those two things happening at once, they mean a lot, but it can always seem so slow going when we're just trying to educate everybody.
It's, getting a populace of change agents is really what we're trying to do. People that grab enough of the capability in this area of process that become change agents to push it will win, right? It is not really a top down. Anything in this area, lean, continuous improvement, process improvement, if any of these subject matter experts come from the bottom and the top, right? And actually the bottom, right? The frontline workers is more important than the top. Once the top actually says it, if the bottom is already bubbled up, right? Because that's what we're working on, is this game of catchball. The leaders really, and I don't want to put any leaders down, that's not my point. The leaders have to understand it too. And I will leave it at that until they start to put their voice behind it. And it takes time to simplify, even though this isn't challenging work. They have to believe in it. But as we're getting the vision to be seen, that isn't just putting words to it, the value creators are doing the work. They're building processes, they're in ProMap, they're building architectures with their leaders. They're starting to see the value. Really great conversation. I know we only have 17 minutes, so I'm going to hammer through here. Does anybody have anything else they want to add before I move? We have a lot to cover in 17 minutes. Awesome discussion. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a couple snapshots of architecture where we were from the highest level. So if we think about Berkeley and we take a step out of organizational structure, forget about org charts, forget about functional units. Let's think process. Put your process hat on. To Janet's point, we know process go across silos. It is the only thing that breaks down the functional units on campus. We can regionalize, we can put functional units on campus, we can split administration from finance, that will never stop. But what will get better is our understanding of process that goes across all of this. So if we're going to take a look at Berkeley from a process level and be up from a plane at the 30,000 foot view, we're calling this the Berkeley house. So the process house is really the highest level macro visual view of the collective end-to-end processes and the integration of strategic and supporting processes all together in one. So let's take a look at this picture. Again, all this is draft, okay, it's early stage, but we have to be able to look at it from the highest level and then kind of zoom way down in. So let's take a look at the Berkeley highest level process. So we have enabling processes kind of in the foundation. These are enabling that mission, that value chain that gave us that competitive advantage at the foundation. We have strategy and integral processes in the roof of the house, right? Setting the goal. This goes to what Mike was saying, things like strategic priorities, setting the goals, steering the campus, and creating, the boundary conditions for our value chains to enable this. And then we put the mission in the middle, the pillars and the mission of the campus. 30,000 foot view, thinking process this way. Okay, great. But what does that mean? Let's take a little bit deeper look here. So if we look again at the different areas, I know there's a bunch missing here, but we're trying to simplify as best as possible. So the mission in the middle, the highest level, right? You start to see things in the top like managing risk, ensuring compliance, managing our finances, ensuring sustainability, in the integral processes, and then some of the foundational things in the foundational enabling processes, managing safety and security. How important is that today? Managing human resources, facilities, accessibility, capital assets, supply chain, right? These are all the enabling aspects that enable the mission in the middle of research, education, and public service. Let's take a look a little deeper. Okay, so these are the end caps to the mission. If you look at the mission in the middle, again, this isn't a perfect world, but if you think about research from an end-to-end of idea to publish, and you think about education from an end-to-end of applying to graduate, and you think about our community service out there within an engage to support end-to-end. Let's accordion that out one more layer and look at it this way. So let's just look at one pillar. Let's look at research. I know there's a bunch missing here, but if you start to really think about things from innovation and entrepreneurship, the research units, the IP, the patents, research administration, the policy, the compliance, publishing research, there's a lot in here, right? Thinking about education, apply to graduate, we have recruitment, student outreach, admissions, managing and developing curriculum, student support services, continuing education, right? In the apply to graduate, and then our community service, all the public service, the philanthropic activities that we do, campus and community service, all the public affairs and events that are happening and engaging our alumni, right, in the entire mission of the campus. So this is just a snapshot. We know things are missing. This is kind of what we're going out there to try to get people to help give us feedback on. What are we missing? What's not right? What doesn't look good? This is the start of thinking about Berkeley from a process. No one in higher education, from my perspective, has ever put forth that I know about or that we know about a picture of the processes of how they sit together in the end-to-end and drive the value of the university from a process backbone. This is the first, and it's many of the first in higher education. Let's pop one of these models out so we start to make it tangible. Look at HR because it's something we all touch on in some facet or another. You may not work in it, but you were hired, so you came through the HR process somewhere. What does this mean when we start to break these models down end to end and we think about human resources outside of its functional unit from a hire to transition? We use transition instead of retire because many of our faculty come back emeritus. A staff member might retire and come back for 2 years. So we transition. We come back to the university, right? It's a beautiful thing. It's a family. It's our community. looking at human resources end to end, this is where your head should go on and think about, where do I sit? What does my unit do? And not think about it from an organizational functional area. So if we take this one step further down from what we're calling this PL2 level, don't get hung up on the semantics too much here. I just want the picture to start to become simple and clear. And we look at HR. HR was one of those foundational enabling processes, right? We talked about it as a hire to transition, acquire, manage, develop, and transition the workforce. And we look at all the processes underneath it. This is still a work in progress. The beauty here is these are actionable models. If I click, for example, Tracker I-9 and I click that, it bounces me right out into the ProMap. So I see the Tracker I-9 process. Kudos to Janet and all her team for starting to develop deep processes and using these actionable models. I'm not going to spend any time here. The beauty is that you can see if all these were clickable. It's why I talk about it as an open shelving system. They're not all clickable right now. They're not all perfectly mapped. We had to do a big turn when we did UC Path, but we're working on it. I just wanted to show you that one quick model there so that we can start to see. We'll talk about a couple other models, but the models are big. They're very, very important for us to think. So again, we popped out HR from down here at the bottom. So I'm going to show you one more view of this just so you can start to see the end-to-end, because I'm speaking about end-to-end value chains and processes in the campus. So if we look at them this way, I know this is going to be a lot of information, the same 3 layers that the house had at the 30,000 foot view. Imagine we're down at 10,000 foot, the same levels here. Okay, so we have the integral and strategy up top, and those are all end-to-ends too, but they're in boxes just because of space fitting on the slide. We have the end-to-ends of the mission of idea to publish, apply to graduate, engage to support. And we have the enabling processes all listed here. Obviously, draft missing, but you start to see the end-to-ends. You start to think about managing our supply chain as procure to pay, managing our accessibility from identifying to maintaining. Are our walls able to have someone in a wheelchair pull in and fit into the toilet? A lot of them aren't. We have to go and maintain that. We have to knock walls down. We want our buildings to be accessible. Okay, manage and deliver IT systems, service to solution, managing and improving our business processes. Here we are, established to maintain. If we're going to talk this, you know we have our own. We cannot go out there without walking the talk here. Managing infrastructure, facilities, parking and transportation, campus and safety security is a TBD. We're working on it right now. Okay, this one's a big one. We obviously have mental compassionate crisis response coming. That's going to bridge into safety and security. We obviously have campus and safety security every day being under the gun here of changing and thinking in new ways. So I just wanted to show the 10,000 foot view after showing the 30,000 foot view. And I'm going to move forward here. I know we only have about 8 minutes. So I just want to stop there and just give people the opportunity to digest for 30 seconds and ask any questions or thoughts on what you're seeing here and ask if it makes sense and it's simple enough to grasp from an end-to-end value chain zone.
Hey, Chris, I have a stupider question than that.
No dumb questions, Janet, no dumb questions.
And that is, okay, we have a collaborative space, right? Like we have a collaborative space and do we have access to this? This is something that, for example, I'm going to need to sort of digest a little bit. Like,
yeah, so we're building this. It's all going to be public on a berkeley.process.edu website, not our own, but a full blown where you'll be able to hopefully click into these models and see everything down.
Even if we take a step back from that, Chris, Janet, to answer your, I'm not sure if you're talking about this material or where it's going to sit in the future. If you're talking about this material, then this slide deck will be available to you.
Yeah, that's what I'm just thinking is that, with any of our little work groups that we got going, Mike, you know, how we just sort of set up a little collaborative space for that and we publish the stuff in, and then, that way I can go and click on it later on and go, oh yeah, let me think about this.
Yeah, this will be in the PCN webpage meeting presentation folder. It will be sent out after this meeting.
Okay, cool.
But going forward, sorry if I'm jumping ahead, Chris, but going forward, we are building a the website URL is actually going to be process.berkeley.edu, and in the house and all these models that Chris is referring to and all these architectures that are being built, it's going to be on this one webpage. So you'll be able to look at the very 30,000 foot level all the way down to mini mode links. Right?
Okay,
So that's
awesome.
That's the future vision that we'll have that launched hopefully by November.
Okay, cool, awesome, thanks.
Great. Thanks, Mike. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. This is just the language I was using. I'm not going to go into the details of the PL01. This is kind of the 30,000 foot view, the 10,000 foot view, just so we have a semantics taxonomy. I'm not going to go into the detail here, but if you think about an index card catalog, all this needs to align. So we have that. We've built a mathematical system. I'm not going to go into what it all is, but when you do click on all that, you'll be able to kind of open a old index card catalog thinking, and you'll be at 1.2.4.6 type thing. So it does work all the way down to the deepest layer of ProMap and all the way up to the model layer on the website. So that's taken us a lot of brain power. I'm not going to go into detail here on the minutia because of time, but we can talk about that at another meeting. So I know we only have a few minutes left here. I'm going to skip over this and kind of turn it over to Nick to show one more example on facilities and talk about process hours. And I apologize for taking the time. I think some of the conversation's been really important.
Just one thing to highlight before going on to the content of this slide is that the models that Chris shared and some of those being developed, again, it's following the process. It's not by org structure. So like Janet, in your world in HR, things live in BRS, APO, central HR, people and culture, OFEW. So those would be part of a whole model with different layers on top. Research administration crosses different divisions, and a lot of the work that we do crosses as well. So what we have here is a model actually that we worked with facilities who are kind of the owner around managed facilities. And you can see what they arrived at was this plan to serve, which had the 3 chevrons: plan, maintain, and serve. But this isn't where they started. They're one of our earliest adopters and jumped right into documenting processes in ProMap. And this is before we had architecture and this idea and understanding of what we needed to help departments to grow in this area. If we go to the next slide, you'll see this is where we started. They started creating folders in ProMap and documenting based on their org structure. These are the teams that existed within their department. And this is kind of organically how they started documenting work. And afterwards, we came back to them with kind of this presentation that you saw, a version of that, and showing them, hey, this is what we think, what we've missed so far, what we need to do to get a better handle on how we govern and process, and how we become more mature in thinking process centric. If we go to the next slide, you can see what that work looked like. We went from having all the processes identified within these teams to thinking about, okay, how do the processes flow from our organization, whether it's a kind of a life cycle or kind of governed around the different services that we do. And by going through this exercise, and so Chelsea and them are not here today, but I can kind of share that they came to an understanding that, okay, yes, we actually have a lot of holes that we didn't realize were there. Now that we look at this by following the process as opposed to everything being divided by teams. And they could see how work would go from one team to another when you follow the process. And this is what we're trying to get to as part of process architecture, is being able to think process-wise and crossing those boundaries. So this might be internal to a team, but it works across divisions as well. You've heard from Chris and Mike about where we are moving in the future, and that includes this clickable model. So what you saw in ProMap is going to be basically duplicated in this process.berkeley.edu. This is a little trailer of what's to come we're hoping to kick off, I believe, in November. And the idea is we'll have a website where you'll be able to click in this model, dive down to this end to end, and that will give you the folders in ProMap, and then you'll go to look at the mini modes of all the processes that have been developed and identified in there. So that's where we're moving to with process architecture. We have very little time left, but we kind of want to open this up to ideas. So how do we go about making process-centric thinking, making how you manage your architecture, if you've got one developed, making it more part of how you think about process? If you haven't got an architecture yet, how do we go about getting to that point for your organization, for your group? So what are some thoughts around what you're seeing today, and how do we make this more of how we think about process on campus?
If I could add too, if no one has anything, if I could add too, I think it's important to remember too that building your end-to-end and building this architecture is just step one of a much longer and bigger journey, right? So once you have your architecture and you have your processes, identified and documented, really the next steps that you can do is then start looking at process health metrics and KPIs and really start seeing, okay, how is this process healthy? What's working, what's not working, and then prioritizing on where you can start doing continuous improvement, right? So developing this architecture is step one of a much larger and bigger journey to help you really get into that process minded, that data driven decision making kind of model that we'd like to transition into.
Okay. Yeah, we start with understanding, what do we do? How are we currently doing at it? How do we improve it? But we got to start with the current state.
And it looks right. You do your own work, but it looks similar, right? The similarity here is the simple format. And you've heard the word gap come up a lot, not just from me today, but this shelving system. I can't tell you how many people build an architecture and they realize they have a whole area that they do, they have nothing mapped, and they put that up there. And a year and a half later, they're coming back to that area, but it's up there. They identified it, they know it. I've seen it in almost every unit. I can't emphasize enough that building this where the gaps are is just as important as what you've actually prioritized for improvement. The open shelves are so important. So what we'll do is, if you have thoughts, we're right at time here, so I don't want to.
Maybe we can do process hours real quick and then.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to, if you have other thoughts on making this, this is a work in progress, feel free to email us, and then I'm going to just jump down to the process hours and give it back to Nick here for a second.
So one of the things we thought as an office that we might be able to do to continue supporting the efforts that you have in your departments is setting up basically Zoom sessions that are drop-in office hours, where you'd be able to come with, work that you want to do in ProMap around your architecture, or just best practices around how you manage process. So we're going to send this announcement out to members of the PCN. We're also going to send it out to anyone who is in ProMap as a content creator, people who can create and edit in ProMap, whether they've been actively using it or they've kind of fallen off. Just kind of say, this is something that's out there. It's a resource we can use. We're going to start with like 30-minute sessions weekly on Wednesdays. We'll send out a way to get the Zoom links when we do get this started. If it grows, that's excellent. We might add extra days, other time slots. We might move it to something where you actually would book an appointment, but we'll start off with just kind of open hours, drop-in sessions. If you're in the room when someone else is asking a question, it's going to be a great opportunity to kind of learn from others and what they're doing and share that experience together. So that's something we're hoping to start launch here very soon. And if I know we're at time, so if this resonates with you, if you love it, let me know. Also, if you have ideas around better ways to do it, let us know about that as well.
So I just want to thank everybody. We'll be back together on July 13th, talking about active sponsorship, kind of bringing it full circle to Kim's comment. Right, our sponsors are oftentimes the leaders, and I think getting more engagement, getting more understanding, that'll be part of it.
And also, I'd like to add too, if you have any sponsors or senior leaders in your area that you think should hear this kind of message, and invite them to this meeting. And that would also help hopefully drive from the leadership top down as well, getting them a little bit more involved and letting them know that this is important to us all.
Well, thank you, everyone. Hopefully everybody stays healthy and safe. We really appreciate your continued contribution, and spreading the word is always welcome. So thank you for your time. We hope everybody has a wonderful and lovely rest of your week. Feel free to reach out too. If thoughts come up, we're an open door. Email, reach out anytime.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks.